Hi everybody, what's brewing? I'm Mike Biana and this is Coffee Talk. Since the dawn of time, religion has long been represented in art. From the hieroglyphics of ancient Egypt to the ceilings of the Sistine Chapel, art and religion have had a harmonious marriage. Joining us at the coffee table today to talk about how this marriage is now joining the Gables Museum is the museum's director, Chris Rupp, and photographer, Carlos Dominic. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Mike.
All right, so paint me a picture here, no pun intended, but tell me about your new exhibit at the museum.
It's the documentation of 8 colonial churches from Santiago de Cuba.
Wow, so obviously you want to take a picture. You've been taking pictures of all of these different cathedrals and churches, right?
Yes.
What is your main purpose and motivation for doing so?
The main purpose was to photograph them so people would be aware of what's going on in Santiago after Hurricane Sandy, how the churches were destroyed by the hurricane. So the idea was to go there and photograph them. We spent 6 days in Cuba photographing there are about 8 churches, including the cathedral. And we documented, and thank God Chris loved the images, and they're at the Gables Museum as an exhibition.
Carlos was just telling us about how you love these pictures. What stood out to you from his photography?
Well, Carlos's use of light is amazing, and that's the one thing that everyone has commented on in the museum, how beautiful these churches look and how he's captured the light filtering through the windows of these churches, the exterior doors opening up and exposing the beauty of the interior and exterior of the structures. The thing that's important to the museum is that these photographs totally nail what the museum is about. We're called the Coral Gables Museum, but we present so much more. So. Right. These churches focus on historic structures, so we're hitting on history. Also architecture, the beautiful techniques that were used to construct these historic churches, and then also preservation. So it's very important that these structures are preserved, because we're talking about not just preserving history, but also that beautiful Cuban culture.
Something that you said that really stuck out to me, Chris, was the preservation of these structures. By that I mean that the hurricane was such a devastating storm that occurred, and these churches were still standing. So talk about the beauty of that in itself, that they were still standing even after such a devastating storm.
Yes, I think that it's amazing how they've been standing there for so many years, and when Sandy hit Santiago for many hours, stood there, and they withstood the hurricane, but they did get a lot of damage. So so that's in itself is amazing how they were able to stood the but nevertheless they got really very damaged. They got a lot of damage.
When you were there in Cuba, being able to take these pictures in Santiago, the people there, how did they feel after that happened?
Well, we went like a year and a half after the hurricane, so the streets were cleaned up. So we really did not experience after the hurricane.
That's amazing, though, that even after a year and a half of having cleaned up the streets, that these churches are still not built up.
Well, yes, it is.
So, I know that with your photography, some of them will be going on sale. And you're trying to help those churches get built up again.
Yes, the idea is to have a fundraiser, and this the funds will go to the preservation, and will go directly to Monsignor Dionisio, who's heading the restoration for the churches.
Yeah, anytime the thing that this exhibit does is bring awareness to the situation over there. So generally speaking, it's very tough in any place, even here in the States, for a preservation movement to gain some traction.
Right. Yes.
And to people buy into how important it is. I mean, Miami's a great example of how many historic buildings we've lost here. So you really have to drive that awareness to get people involved and make them understand how important it is to save historic buildings, because they have so much meaning, not just for the past, but for the future, because they tell a story.
Right. And Chris, because of along those lines of what you just said, it is kind of hard for us to remember some of these things. We remember Hurricane Sandy, but we don't remember necessarily the people or the countries that were impacted. So how integral do you think Carlos's photography is to this movement?
Well, it's a perfect example. I mean, especially with Cuba, we don't have open communication. Hopefully, that's going to change in the future. But for people to actually find out what's happened there, it has to be through person-to-person communication. Am I right, Carlos?
Yes.
I mean, it's not like Cuba, the country issues statements to us about situations over there. So it's really the population.
Now, how long will this exhibit be running through for all of our viewers who are very much interested to go?
Sure. This is going to be here for 2 more weeks. It runs through February 22nd. And we will be having a number of events throughout the exhibit. Yesterday, Carlos led a very packed house for a curator's tour. Maybe we should do that again, Carlos. And also we'll be having a couple nighttime receptions. So if anyone needs any information about the exhibit, they can just contact the museum.
And in terms of the fundraising efforts and buying some of your pieces, how would people go about doing that?
Well, they would have to contact the museum, and the museum has the prices, and they can purchase it from there, and it's tax deductible. So yeah, that would be the best way.
Great. And of course, you've got more information on the Coral Gables Museum website.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us, guys, and telling me and telling our viewers about this wonderful exhibit. We look forward to seeing more of them.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Once again, that was photographer Carlos Dominic and the Coral Gables Museum Director, Chris Rupp. That'll do it for this edition of Coffee Talk. I'm Mike Biana. We'll talk to you soon.